Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members and officers. Welcome to the Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome the journalism students today, observing the meeting in the public gallery. I hope it's informative for you. Firstly, in the interest of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts, and please assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust fire marshal regulations, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. For those of you who have not attended this committee before, I'll explain the running order for you this afternoon. After the committee members have declared their interest and agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, I will announce each item and ask those of you who are here to make a deputation to come and sit at the table in front of us. After the planning officer has made the presentation for the application, individual deputies will have, it says 6 minutes to express their views, and joint deputies will have 12 minutes between them to make their views known. I think we have 4 deputies at the moment, don't we, from members of the public, Lisa?
Yes.
Yeah, so okay, they've got 4 minutes each. After which you'll have no further parts taken in your proceedings unless we ask you a question to clarify a statement that has been made. Members will then ask questions, make various comments, and the decision on the application will be made. Both members of the committee and members of the public are reminded of the need to consider material planning matters and not to refer to any personal information about other members of the public. May I also draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and filmed from a camera in a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the council's website. The camera's in the back there, so if you all try to have a quick look. The camera will mainly capture the backs of people's heads as they're making their deputations, but there will be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering and leaving the room while the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Finally, may I ask that everyone use the microphones provided when they're speaking, because it won't pick up any sound for the recording. Thank you. Firstly, do we have any apologies, Lisa?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Vernon Jackson, who I believe will be represented by Councillor Susie Horton, who is running slightly late because she's teaching.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of members' interests? And here comes Councillor Horton. Do you have any interest to declare, Susie?
No.
Okay, thank you. Are the minutes of the...
Could I just do a point of order?
Of course
Actually,
you can.
too. So we've got some students in the room by the look of it, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if we just go round so that they have an understanding of who's what and who does what. We're the useless side, but they're the clever side.
To be fair, Councillor, I was just about to get onto that.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Okay. But, you know, we'll start from the corner from Councillor Pitt, if that would be...
Hi, so I'm Councillor Steve Pitt and I represent Central Southsea Ward.
Councillor Hugh Mason and I represent St Jude Ward.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Lee Hunt and I'm a Liberal Democrat councillor. I represent Central Southsea Ward as well.
I'm Colin Galloway, councillor for Nelson Ward.
I'm Councillor Gemma New and I represent Paulsgrove Ward.
Councillor Frank Jonas and I represent the Hillsey Ward.
Jenny Brent and I represent Eastern and Craneswater.
Councillor Susie Horton. I also represent Central Southsea Ward. Apologies for my lateness, I've just come from a lecture.
Michael Lawther, City Solicitor.
Ruth Miller, the Development Manager.
Jane Thatcher, Planning Officer.
Richard Lee, Regulatory Services Manager.
Kieran Laven, Planning and Highways Solicitor.
Claire Upton Brown, Head of Planning.
Councillor Scott Pater Harris, I'm Vice Chair of the committee, but I'm chairing the meeting today. I'm Hillsey Ward.
Lisa Gallagher, Democratic Services.
Right, let's move on to our plan of action for the day. Minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Are they agreed?
They are, but could I raise a point?
Can.
I wonder, if you just forgive me whilst I get to my notes. I don't want my camera. I've been asked, well, in fact, I'm concerned because I'm wondering if there's any feedback because we have raised this before, about whether or not there's been any progress towards streamlining the HMO application process, i.e. ensuring that the density count data and calculation is done at the very first step in an assessment process, giving the applicant a chance to withdraw their application and putting systems in place to ensure there is a communication alignment between planning and licensing departments. The reason I asked that, Mr Chairman, one moment, Ms Brown, is that we know the officers are under a huge amount of pressure, and it seems to me if you go through the process of coming to a conclusion about an HMO application and then they have to pay for it, and we know full well that they're going to be turned down because of the HMO data count, it seems to me that everybody's wasting their time and their money's being wasted. So forgive me for going on, but that's the point.
Okay, yep, this was the action to for planning and licensing to work together to create one common database. That work is progressing well. There has been a slight delay in that the licensing team have migrated all their data onto the uniform system, which is the same system as is used in planning, licensing, environmental health. And as is often the case when you migrate data, that data sometimes needs to be checked, cleaned up and verified. So they're just going through that process because at the moment the data is only 80% accurate and it needs to be 100% accurate if we are going to have members of the public relying on that information. So it is work in progress, and that will be concluded as quickly as the licensing team are able to be confident. I'm happy to offline confirm with you what that time, but it is work that is currently in progress. It was discussed again last week with the licensing team, and it's a priority for them.
Lee, can you use your microphone, please?
Beg your pardon. What about the other point that I've raised, that people make an application in an area that's already saturated by more than 10% HMOs, and that we know that the application is going to fail, and it seems to be, to some people, and including me, money for old rope, but at the same time you have to pay for the officer time, and you're all under a huge amount of pressure. I'm just wondering if there's a way of cutting out a process that's going to free up your time.
So there's sort of two elements to that. Legally, we offer pre-app advice, so it's open to any person thinking about submitting an application to come to the council and ask for advice on the likely outcome on that proposal in advance of submitting an application. So that's a service that we offer to everybody. If we do receive an application, then legally we have no option but to deal with that application in the same way as we deal with all applications, regardless of what we think the outcome might be. So legally we have to register it, consult on it, etc. And legally we have to give them a decision on that application.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Moving on to any update on previous planning applications by the Assistant Director of City Development. Do you have anything for us, Claire?
Members, I don't have any update, but some members will be aware that there were 2 appeal decisions that came out the day before yesterday, I think, that were testing the new SPD, but they were applications that were considered prior to that SPD being adopted. On both cases, the inspector didn't uphold the amendments to the SPD. And it may well be because it was in that transition period and this isn't a true reflection of the robustness of that amendment to the SPD. I think the test will be when we get some decisions through that were decided post the SPD being amended. But I will bring a short report to the next planning committee on both those items.
Councillor Mason.
Claire, is there any danger that, given that the the approvals of the appeals were accepted, and they came in this transition period, that this will form a precedent which can be relied upon under our new SPD?
I think it would be for subsequent inspectors to make a judgment on the weight they give to those 2 appeal decisions, but I'm in no doubt that subsequent appellants will use those in their favour to present to subsequent inspectors.
Councillor Hunt.
Yes, so I want to be absolutely clear, because I've already been debating this within my own group. My view is similar to your view, in that these appeals that are coming forward now and have been allowed were as a result of being in the transition period. In a similar way, we've seen that with some other issues before. So we now need to look forward, as it were, to testing with the planning inspectorate. One of the HMOs, sui generis HMOs, determined under the new SPD. That's right, isn't it?
That's my advice.
So we've got to continue with it. That's great.
I quite agree with Councillor Hunt on that point, actually. Moving on to modification of legal agreement associated with planning permissions in relation to student occupation obligations.
So, members, you've got a full report. The application seeks to modify the wording of an existing agreement to enable a student to occupy the same room for an extended period of time. The proposed modification is in line with the clauses we would normally use, and the clause that was put on the agreement that the applicant is seeking to modify is an unusual clause in the way it's been worded. So we're recommending that the modification is agreed.
Any questions, members? Any comments?
Does it apply here right now to this law?
Councillor Mason.
Well, I propose the officer's recommendation. It seems to me very sensible that a student who has had a good experience should be allowed to occupy the same room in the subsequent year, provided there is this 1 week gap. So I propose the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, actually, on that point. So we're quite happy to move to the vote, members. All agreed? Unanimous. Honestly, it's never that easy. Moving on to planning application, item 6 on the agenda, 36 to 38 Palmerston Road. I'm going to hand you over to the officer.
Good afternoon.
Of course you are, Councillor Hunt. Yeah, go over there. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, members. The application relates to a commercial unit located on the northern part of Palmerston Road, designated as the principal retail area. Planning permission is sought for the change of use from retail Class A1 to cafe restaurant Class A3. The proposal would also include the installation of an extract system, alterations to the shop front and external seating area. I'll just give you some visuals, show where it is. So that's the site we're looking at, opposite Stanley Street there, with a rear access from Tonbridge Street down there. So that's the principal elevation fronting Palmerston Road. The site was formerly known as the Laura Ashley shop, and it has been vacated since July 2017. The application relates to the ground floor and first floor unit of the shop. There's a rear elevation facing east and some existing AC units. It's taken from the top near Palmerston Mansions, and there we have one facing east showing Palmerston Mansions. Some existing elevations of the shop. There'll be limited changes made. In terms of principle, if a proposed change of use were to be granted, the proportion of Class A1 shops in the primary frontage would drop to 76%, which would remain above the 75% threshold as set out in policy STC3. In design terms, the front elevation at ground floor level would be recessed by approximately 2.2 metres to allow for an external seating area. The agent has confirmed that all the seats would be contained within the footprint of the building, and none would be going out onto the pedestrianised area in Palmerston Road. Given the limited nature also add, amended plans have been received as part of this application, which removed the rear flue, and we now have just an outlet and inlet in existing windows, as shown in the bottom drawing there and there. Oh, sorry, there. So given the limited nature of works and that they would be applied to a commercial building within a largely commercial area, the design and appearance are considered acceptable. It is noted a number of representations have been received, namely relating to the impact on residential amenity. However, the environmental health team have been consulted and are satisfied that the harm caused by the A3 use could be managed by way of imposing certain planning conditions. As well as the standard conditions imposed, it's considered appropriate to restrict opening hours between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. Sunday to Monday, as well as imposing conditions relating to the extract system, noise, waste and delivery times. For reasons set out in the committee report and subject to conditions, the recommendation is for conditional permission.
Thank you very much, I'd like to invite the deputies to come forward to the table. Thank you. I don't think they're all here. Okay, I've just looked down to the deputation sheet. I don't think everybody is here. So, do we have Mr. Alan Smith? Actually, would you like to go first? You have, we meant to have 3 minutes, but because obviously there's less people here, I can actually allot that to about 4.5.
Okay, that's fine. Well, good afternoon. My name's Alan Smith. I live in Grove Road South, which is just north of the pedestrianised precinct. It's used by anyone really walking to and from the Elm Grove area and beyond. I've got 3 objections to this application. The effect on the amenity of neighbouring residents, the effect on the character of the pedestrianised precinct, and the apparent conflict with the council's own planning strategy. So, as I think we've probably seen from these plans, that the residential flats are both above and opposite the location of the applicants, which is in itself opposite Knightonley and besides Debenhams. So most of the commercial units in the precinct are A1 retail. 3 small A3 units, Coffee Number 1, Costa and Greggs, all close at the end of each working day, and they don't serve alcohol. The Tesco Express at the top of the precinct closes at about 10 o'clock at night. It sells alcohol, but not for consumption on the premises. And these units tend to complement the retail businesses and add to the local character. Well, in sharp contrast, this application asks to serve alcohol and to do so until 11:30 at night and to midnight at weekends. I appreciate that conditions are suggested to change that. But all of that, of course, will change, in my view, the character of the precinct completely. Residents who will be very close at hand to this establishment will have to contend with noise from people arriving and leaving, those seated and smokers standing outside, the eating and drinking noise from inside, deliveries, bottles and refuse collection, and the deliveries and bottles collection will be from the back of these premises down a very narrow access road. Plus, of course, there was originally an extraction system with its noise and fumes venting at the very level of their windows, but I gather from what the planning officers said that the extract flue is no longer there, which raises a question as to how on earth all of the food and cooking fumes are going to be dispelled. The Environmental Health Officer's report describes an evening noise assessment of the precinct, showing low levels of noise with very little pedestrian movement passing through. This application surely will spread noisy night-time type activities from Palmerston Road South over the Osborne Road divide and to the much quieter pedestrianised precinct area. The Environmental Officer also pointed out at the time the application was being considered that the proposed kitchen fume extraction system was unacceptable, that there was insufficient detail to determine whether the extraction system's noise suppression arrangements were acceptable, and that no information had been provided to judge whether noise insulation within the building itself was acceptable. The City Council's Portsmouth plan talks of protecting amenity while providing a good standard of living environment for neighbouring and local occupiers. But I can't see that this proposal will do anything but the opposite. It will diminish the amenity and degrade the living environment for those unfortunate enough to live close by. And they do live very close to this, right over the top of it, with balconies. The South Sea Town Centre Area Action Plan, if I can manage to say that, presumes that there will continue to be a maintenance of the division between a restaurant quarter, Osborne Road and Palmerston Road South, and a retail quarter with the Palmerston Road pedestrianised precinct. And its policy, STC4, specifically states new restaurants and cafes will be encouraged to locate in Osborne Road and Palmerston Road South. So we've got a well-established, or you've got a well-established planning strategy separating business areas by functional types, but that appears to be being overlooked. It's one thing having the likes of Costa and Greggs operating during the working day amongst the retail units, but quite another introducing a food and bar establishment over 2 floor levels, which operates well into the night. I don't doubt that Lounges Limited is a responsible operator, nor that the company's lounges complement or even add to certain environments, but not here. The proposal seems to be, can only be described as a nice idea, but in the wrong place. Finally, I would hope that you could agree to reject this application and save the local residents and the precinct's character. Thank you very much. I'm sorry when I'm a bit over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Appreciate that. Mr. Adair, would you like to give your deputation? Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Richard Adair, and I'm standing in the elections taking place for the local council on the 3rd of May. I'm standing in St Jude's ward, and that's the area covered by this application site. I'm here to let you know the views of residents I've gathered concerning this application. Yesterday, my team and I spoke to over 50 residents in the immediate locality, i.e. Stanley Street, Richmond Road, Lennox Road North, and a little further afield at Wilton Place and Wilton Terrace. The previous week I called on residents around Fontwell Road, as well as residents in the roads I've already mentioned who were out at the time of my first visit. Whilst many residents were unaware of the application, those living closest, particularly in Stanley Street, were very concerned about an increase in noise and disturbance created by an A3 establishment at the end of their road. Many residents were very concerned about the loss of yet another retail shop and the undermining of this part of Palmerston Road as the main shopping area. There is an issue in Stanley Street which particularly concerned residents, namely the end of free parking at the Waitrose car park. And while some patrons of the premises may be willing to pay for parking, there was a concern that those attending the premises would park on and around Stanley Street, thereby displacing residents. Residents felt that patrons leaving at night would cause an unacceptable level of noise, and many homes have windows and bedrooms close to the road. In order to provide balance, a number of residents said that they would rather have something there rather than a boarded up shop front. Overall, the application was not welcome locally, with residents concerned about losing a shop to be replaced by late evening noise, smells and extra pressure on parking on already clogged streets where residents struggle to find spaces. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Adair. Move on, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was out with Richard, helping him do this survey, and I can only reiterate what he said. There's great concern from residents. We've worked very hard across all the council to protect South East Shopping Centre, and Linda and I go back a long way, back 20 years. We were concerned to protect Southsea Shopping Centre, indeed you as well. We had a march through the Southsea Town Centre. We've swapped parties. Well, I have swapped parties, of course, as Linda well knows. But the point is the same. It hasn't changed. It is really important. This is an important local shopping centre. That means shops. The Southsea Town Centre action plan says we want 75% of frontage in shopping. So I don't know what has been included into that percentage to reach this conclusion that an A3 could come. For example, the library, I don't know, you'll probably tell me in a minute, the library, has that frontage been included on the grounds that there's a little shop in the front at the moment? If not, I would say if it has, I would say it needs to be taken out. And also, is Greg's determined as a shop? Because I think that its use as an A3 is determined as a selling cold food type things. Is that a shop or is it a cafe within the meaning of A3? So members, you know, I know it's all very tight, but the truth is the people that we spoke to did not want this overall, as Richard has said. They're very concerned about late night noise. They don't have it at the moment. If you stand at the end of if you stand in Stanley Street, you look down the street, you look straight at this property. There's high walls either side, and as people come out and go, that noise is going to be channeled straight down Stanley Street. So they are going to get disturbed later into the evening now, whereas at the moment they do not. The issue with Waitrose is still a little bit vague at the moment, but it does look like Waitrose, I don't know if all members are aware, are shutting their car park with barriers. At the end of the week, those barriers are going down permanently at the night time. So, but you can get in on paying to park. And it may well be that patrons do go down. Maybe Waitrose will be convinced to lift them up, but so far they've told me that because of antisocial behaviour in the car park and vehicles being left there, which is important, Mr Chairman. Have I over my 6 minutes?
It's not that, it's just that, can you just point me to the relevance this is to the planning application? Because at the moment, can you just state that please, a bit more clearer for me?
Parking, is that quick enough? Yeah, okay. So it's parking, because if you stop people who are currently go into Waitrose car park now, the on-street car parking is going to be even greater as people come to these extra premises. That is the point that's evolving. So there's going to be an increased call on very difficult parking arrangements on street already for residents down there. Some people said that they would like to see the parking reduced to 1 hour to try and help avoid this. That's a matter for some other time, I know. But it does show that people are concerned about parking. Parking is an issue in this matter. But is the late noise and the disturbance? I'm equally concerned from the report to look at the ventilation equipment. I mean, it's pretty bold in there. It is going to, if it remains as it is now, it is going to cause a lot of distress by way of noise and smells and taste going to people's mouths if it is left as it is proposed at the moment. That doesn't fill me with much confidence. I'm sure many of the members won't feel that way either. We'll feel that way too. So I think for all those reasons, you should really chuck it out and say we want to preserve our local shops. Shops are important for local people to shop in. That's about it, members. Look after your local shops.
And thank you for that, Councillor Hunt. I do share your concerns on the ventilation system. Would you like to please leave the meeting now?
Not because I've done anything bad.
No, in all honesty, he hasn't done anything bad. Over to yourself, Councillor Symes. I'll wait for Councillor Hunt to leave. That's all right, Lee. Over to you, Councillor Symes. Can you use the microphone, please?
Sorry. I'm very torn on this issue. On the one hand, I look and I think, why haven't we got more shops in the precinct? On the other hand, we've been doing a shopping survey over several months now, which has determined that far more people now shop on the internet. That leads to the erosion of shops, that leads to empty spaces. You go to some shopping centres now and there are just rows of boarded up shops. I don't want that to happen in Southsea. If I thought there was a retailer who would go in there, I'd really love to keep it as a shop. But on balance, I think that's highly unlikely. I also think that if this application were to go to the planning inspectorate, it will probably be given permission. Having said that, there are lots of things that do concern me. If they're going to stay open later at night, and I certainly hope that won't be later than 9 or 10 o'clock, should that first floor be closed? Is there going to be noise attenuation between that second floor and the residents who are living above it? I think the other thing is, would having something there increase the footfall to the shops? Because it will bring people into the shopping area. That's something else. Lots of shopping areas around. I had a look online to see how they were constituted, and a lot of them had really mixed uses now. And that's merely because of the erosion of the shops. So I would like to say to you, on balance, if you consider it, it has to have a belt and braces conditions on it to make sure that it has as little impact as possible on the residential amenities of those in the surrounding area. If you decide to oppose, to refuse it, I would just hope that something likely would go in there in the next few years and it just doesn't remain a boarded up shop. So that's basically what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to members' questions. Councillor Hugh Mason.
I have two initial questions, and the first one does concern this percentage which is in retail use, because that was the core of the plan which we developed some years ago for Southsea, that we would look to have a restaurant quarter on Osborne Road, Lower Palmerston Road, but in the precinct itself we were looking for at least 75% to be in A1 use. We have here 2 banks, 1 library and 3 cafes already. I would like to be assured of how you come to the belief that there is 75% which is in retail use at the present time. And I'd like your confirmation on that and the details. The second thing which I would like to raise is the matter of this rear flue. Anyone who has been in the Palmerston Mansions, that the top floor there, will be well aware that there is not a great amount of space at the back in some areas, especially in this lower section towards Debenhams, because it comes into a closed little cul-de-sac. And I am concerned that without adequate removal of fumes from a cafe stroke restaurant, there will be a loss of amenity, a serious loss of amenity, to the residents of these maisonettes above the shops.
Over to you, Ruth.
Okay, thank you for the question. In terms of the actual monitoring of the shop frontages, the planning service undertakes that on an annual basis, and the Palmerston Road last count did indicate that the actual Palmerston Road area did have 78%, which is, as you can appreciate, above the 75%. I think the key part of your question, though, is the use class of libraries and the use class of the banks, and whether they're actually impacting in terms of the vibrancy of the town centre. And in terms of our policy assessment of this application, it would still actually keep the percentage above the minimum required, which is 75%. This proposal would drop it from 78 to 76%. And, on that basis, we've been able to support it in terms of the planning principle.
Do you want to follow up onto the second question? That'd be for Richard.
I think the concept of residential accommodation above A3 premises is fairly well established around certain areas of the city, and there are examples of where that takes place and there is not a loss of amenity. I think the report is clear in that although the plant, as we can see in the plans, looks fairly substantial, we are not, or we don't have sufficient information regarding that plant as shown on the plan, as to whether it will be sufficient to ensure that there is not a loss of amenity, hence the condition that prior to commencement we need full details of all the plant to be installed within that extraction system. What I would say is that where we have low-level extraction in a location such as this, and I think the member is correct in relation to dispersion because of its location, and that wind isn't going to disperse as it would a high-level or higher-level extraction system. I would say that any extraction system is a managerial tool. In that the management, the owners of the company, if they maintain the system, which as approved upon installation, so if they maintain it through the life of that system in terms of its abilities to combat odour, then it should work adequately well. In terms of what is actually required, I wait to see what comes forward. There are many different types of extraction system. Ozone was mentioned in the original application. Carbon is a familiar use. There are combinations of different types of extraction system which can deliver suitable odour neutralisation. But we will have to wait and see what is put forward, and obviously we will ensure that it's what is put forward meets the requirements of the local authority. We will have high regard to the advice provided by DEFRA in relation to the design of extraction systems. They produced some very in-depth information in 2005. The applicant does make reference to that, and we will ensure that in accordance with that documentation, the likelihood that the system will be adequate is in fact delivered through the pre-design discussions. But I reiterate, through the life of the extraction system, it is the maintenance of that system which is key to ensure that the amenity of the residents is protected. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Richard. Councillor Jonas.
Yes, Chair. My question actually was very similar to Councillor Hugh Mason's, and that has been answered by the officer. The other question was our Portsmouth plan for the area, saying that we didn't have or haven't had restaurants above the Osborne Road, so north in Palmerston. My memory serves me right, and perhaps I'm going back before the Portsmouth plan came out. I thought there was a restaurant just inside Stanley Road years ago. I thought it was a French restaurant that was there for years. If I'm wrong, tell me, and if it's changed the overall Pompey plan since then, I stand corrected.
I'm not able to confirm whether there was or wasn't a restaurant.
There was.
Okay. But the current, Southsea Town Centre SPD was adopted under the 2006 local plan, so it would have been consistent with that local plan, and it was adopted as a direct result of the pressure and the likely implications of the city centre redevelopment, which was under the plan before that. So the plans have sort of changed over time, but the SPD has been re-adopted under the 2012 local plan because of the need to protect retail within Southsea.
Just to confirm that there was a restaurant there, Councillor Jonas. They say it was named after a snail, but I think it was a racehorse personally. So, over to Councillor Pitt.
I got all of your references there, Scott, so I'll show my ability to be old and understand youth speak at the same time. Okay, a couple of questions on this one. The first is relating to the extraction system. We've had before now a number of occasions when just the extraction system itself has come to the planning committee. So since we don't have the full details, would it be the case that whatever the physical structure that is proposed for that extraction system is put forward, that bit of it would come back to the planning committee?
In the past, Councillor Pitt, when you've had extraction systems, it's because of them being in a conservation area on listed buildings and the like, which is what some of those previous proposals were. In this instance, the extraction system itself isn't going to require further planning permission. It requires further control through the imposition of the condition and the finite design, which clearly our environmental health officers would work with the proponent with to ensure that it's appropriately designed. So it wouldn't require further planning committee report in terms of the discharge of the condition or any subsequent planning permissions. It's something that we would need to ensure was acceptable before we could actually discharge the condition and before the premises could be occupied and used.
Okay. The second point was that in the report before us on the impact on residential amenity on page 9, the third paragraph from the bottom, the last part of that refers to the noise assessment for Palmerston Road and makes specific reference to the dominant noise source being a telephone kiosk, which I should imagine is relatively quiet. In order to mitigate the concern raised by the environmental health team, a condition has been imposed to restrict the hours of use between 8 AM and 11 PM, even though, higher up the paragraph, we see reference made to the local latest opening premises in the pedestrianised area is 2200. So I'm just wondering what informed the decision that if we are currently looking at a latest closing of 2200, why a closing of 2300 is appropriate for this premises.
I believe that was a review because of a number of restaurants in the south part of Palmerston Road closing at 11, so it will be in line with those restaurant opening hours.
Okay, just to press that a bit harder, it's not in the same area as those other restaurants. That we could say that about all sorts of things around the city, but this is a specifically a retail area with very little A3 use and virtually no use outside normal hours of business. So would you agree that that's a marginal decision, or was that something that was a decision that was robustly made?
If I can maybe respond to that one, I mean, it's our recommendation as officers to you that that's the time that's imposed. It's obviously your judgment whether you think that's an appropriate time or there should be an extended or reduced time given the different opening and closing times within the area and the wider area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horton?
I don't think I'm going to get an answer to this. It's about the extraction plan again, but I just want to have something noted that all of the discussion so far was regarding the smells. I agree with Councillor Mason about the location in that area, and I know things have been talked about in terms of adequate and it's going to be good enough and subject to all sorts of regulations. But I just want to have it noted about the noise because apart from the smells, there is a noise issue. For someone who likes to move hotel rooms when there's an extractor fan outside my hotel room, I would find it really difficult if I hadn't had an extractor fan outside my house, and now I did. So I'm presuming there are all sorts of regulations about noise levels, but I just want to have it noted that that is a particular issue for me as well as the smells.
It is noted, we noted that as well. There is a condition relating to noise generated specifically in regard to the extraction system. We've applied an idea of where we want the applicant to consider, and there's a standard, a British standard, which is a very common standard in relation to the impact of a retail, a commercial use impacting upon residential accommodation. So we've referred it within our condition to that standard, and we expect the applicant to produce a scheme, once again, to ensure that standard is met. I won't go into the detail of the standard. There's some debate, I guess, amongst experts, acousticians, whether any standard would be suitable, because we as humans, of course, can hear noise below the highest level of noise, if that makes some sense. So any noise to some individuals may become audible, and because of sensitivities of individuals are different from individual to individual, individuals may say that any noise is too much noise. Clearly, we had some plants, which was shown in the photographs of air conditioning. I think that was air conditioning plant. So there has been plant in the immediate area. You'll note also from the plans that with the removal of the flue externally to internally, then some of the noise might be easier to combat because it will be contained within the projection of the building, which is not immediately beneath residential accommodation. There will, however, of course, be an audible noise at the extraction point. Even if it complies with the standard that we are recommending, at that location, it will not be inaudible. You will be able to hear the noise. So although we have recommended a standard, which is, as I say, a British standard, which relates to new noise effectively from a non-residential use affecting a residential use, there is always a debate about how much noise is too much noise. In our view, because of the mixture of use, because of the existing accommodation, it is reasonable to apply a condition along the nature of the one that we have recommended. I hope that's helpful.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Mason.
Coming to the use of this place as a restaurant, the agent has confirmed that tables, chairs and barriers would be kept within the recessed area of the footprint of the unit. Does that mean, A, that they would only be set out within that footprint of the unit? And does the footprint of the unit extend to any distance at all beyond the current frontage of the shop?
As I stated earlier, I did go back to the agent and they did confirm in writing that this is going to be recessed 2.2 metres back, and the tables and chairs, as you can see, are behind the frontage and do not extend into a pedestrianised area.
Is the whole of that pedestrianised area public right-of-way, public owned land, or is some of that owned as part of the shops? Because in many cases in Southsea, you find that the area owned by the shop extends beyond the frontage of the building.
They're not proposing anything beyond the frontage of the building, so it is...
That wasn't my question. I'm not dealing with what they're concerned with what they're suggesting now, but what they could be suggesting in 6 months' time. What are their rights beyond the building, front of the building line, if any, into Palmerston Road? Because clearly on the other side of the road, other side of Palmerston Road, the ownership extends to the width of the canopy. Is there such a extension on this side of the road?
Okay, the red and blue line plan, which accompanies the planning application, makes it clear that the applicant doesn't own any land outside of the demise of the building. So your question around privatisation of the pedestrian walkway down Palmerston Road would be, it's a separate matter in relation to the use of the highway, is my understanding. It's not actually a right of ownership in terms of the title that runs with the shop.
Councillor Pitt.
Okay, drilling down on in the same direction that Councillor Mason was heading, the first part of the question, which I'll ask separately if that's okay, is are shops especially on that side of Palmerston Road, able to apply for tables and chairs licences separately?
That would be an amenity on the highway licence, so not a planning matter. And I believe they are within that area, but I wouldn't like to confirm to the planning committee.
I think they are too. And for the students present today, this is one of the problems that we have with different quasi-judicial processes of this council, that sometimes we can make a decision here and somebody else who has to give approval to a different part of the process can change the nature of what we think we've agreed to so that it becomes something very different. So it is distinctly possible that we could have this limitation here, that it's sat within the demise of the existing building footprint, but that a tables and chairs licence suddenly extends that and enables the use outside that space. So therefore my question becomes, do we have the ability as a condition under planning law to limit the outside use of those tables and chairs to a certain hour?
Don't.
By that I mean the existing ones, not any that might be subject to a different licence.
So as Ruth's confirmed, the red line in the application includes those chairs, so any condition would apply to everything within the red line, including the chairs.
So we couldn't separately put a condition on to say that those on the outside, those exposed to the elements, for want of a better description, are not able to be occupied after a certain time, which is something we do all over the place very regularly, say that outside use is limited to a certain hour.
As a planning committee, you could make a judgment whether you thought there was a planning reason to do that in terms of, I don't know, potential noise and disturbance, but there would have to be the planning justification to do that, which obviously would in part be influenced by whether there are other tables and chairs within the area that are being used and sat on to 11 o'clock at night.
And therefore, can you confirm whether there are any in Palmerston Road precinct?
No, I don't think we're able to actually confirm whether there are, and if there are, what times they are allowed to be used by. Fine.
Any more questions before we move on to comments? No, brilliant. On to comments. Who would like to go first? Go for Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Chair. Well, what Councillor Symes said, it's good to see something coming to life in a precinct. Nothing worse to walk down a precinct and see shops boarded up. So for me, I would definitely go along with this proposal. I would take the officers' idea that we give them permission for this. But on item 3 in the conditions, I'm not too happy about extending the licensing hours to 2300. I think if we want to keep it reasonable, we could keep that to 2200. If that was part of the condition, I would definitely go along with this.
Are you formally proposing to amend the conditions on that reason?
I am, yes, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Galloway. Any other questions? Councillor, comments, sorry, yeah, I'm getting confused already. Councillor Pitt, then Councillor Jonas.
Okay, I totally agree with Councillor Galloway and I would happily second that. I would like to add that the use of the outside space shouldn't happen beyond 9 p.m. because that would be entirely consistent with what we do with lots of other bars and restaurants in the city, to say that outside space should not be used after 9 p.m. That gives an indicator to any future application for an amenity licence for tables and chairs that that's what planning said at the outset. So that if a tables and chairs licence should be granted at a future date, hopefully common sense will prevail and say that after 9 o'clock that licence shouldn't be used because we'd amended it in planning at an earlier stage. And hopefully by amending it to 10 o'clock, when it comes to licensing committee under a separate application, it would mean that the terminal hour for the sale of alcohol, if not supplied with food, would be 9:30, because it would normally be 30 minutes before the premises closed, which would mean that this whole thing then becomes a restaurant and bar facility which is primarily serving the existing retail elements in Palmerston Road, which is what we would like to think it is, since it's opening from 8 o'clock in the morning. Presumably it's going to be serving breakfast, teas, coffees and stuff all day. It has that remit. It then has an added benefit, within a retail area to continue for a reasonable period of time, but that we don't extend the use of any premises in the precinct beyond 10 o'clock in line with the existing opening hours of Tesco's. I think that that's a defendable argument to put forward under planning law. So I second Councillor Galloway, but with that extra bit around the tables and chairs outside.
Councillor Jonas.
Yes, Chair. Comments. The first comment is that being a former small retailer myself, it's sad to see the retail units closing, and I think that's something we're going to see for a long time to come. The other thing is, don't let's kid ourselves. This is a bar. There will be noise. There will be fumes from the kitchen, and if we agree, then we're agreeing to this going into this area. Is at the thin edge of the wedge. As more and more retail units come up, will we have more and more bars spreading from the south to the north? There's something nobody can tell. Are we going to set a precedent here? Say retail doesn't make money. The only alternative is to go over to A3. I think all this is worth considering. I still think that the policy is good, that we tried to keep everything safe through Osborne Road. I think this will be noisy. I don't see how a bar, restaurant, whatever you want to call it will be quiet. The least of the people's problems will be a noisy fan. But you just asked for comments, and that's my comments.
I think they're extremely valid, actually, Councillor Jonas. I actually think it's quite a big risk for a bar restaurant in this day and age. I mean, Councillor Pitt would know running a pub is not easy, and in this modern day era, it's just I think it's a big risk for the area as well. Do we have any other comments? Councillor Mason.
I would certainly go along with Councillor Pitt's suggestion that nothing outside after 9 o'clock, because after 9 o'clock the noise will be funneled down Stanley Street and people need to get their children to bed. As far as the whole application is concerned, we've got an application which is half made because we don't know what the extraction process will be. We don't know how the scheme will be insulated. We don't know very much about how refuse will be stored. There are a number of things which one would expect to see in a planning application which are not yet here. I concur with the general opinion that this were to go to appeal, we would be overturned. So I think that it is important that if we accept this, and I think the general mood is that we accept it, we put on the most stringent conditions to meet our requirements in order to preserve the amenity of those people who are living in the vicinity.
Councillor Pitt, do we have any other after Councillor Pitt before I move to after you?
There's a bit of clarification on what I said earlier about the tables and chairs thing, actually, especially since reference has been made to Lescargo, which used to exist down there. The point being that when Lescargo existed, which used to have great function room upstairs for parties and all sorts of things, and was a very vibrant place for many years, and I enjoyed several evenings in there, it was before the smoking ban. So smoking was able to take place within the building then. You didn't have customers needing to come outside during the evening. They could be picked up at the end of the night having arrived, and that was a self-contained process. The difference here is we have a large pedestrianised area where you could have a lot of people getting a drink and spilling out onto pedestrianised area, particularly with the tables and chairs licence going on into the evening. And I'm just thinking of a warm summer night and a large congregation of people outside this space where they're not limited by the depth of the pavement to a road or anything else. They can just spill out into that area. We could end up with a big problem if we don't limit the use of tables and chairs outside after 9 o'clock. So that's why I think it's so important, is that whatever is happening in there is contained within that building into the evening, and not that the whole of Palmerston Road can suddenly start to become an additional area which needs additional policing and control because of people spreading out. Tables and chairs licence in the evening is very likely to get granted well beyond the size of the actual footprint of the building, for the exact reason that there is nothing else going on down there. So they could put a really good argument for that and have quite a large outside space which could have 50, 60 people standing in it, and that would be a nuisance to the area. So I think that although there was l'escargot, and it's a very valid point, this could be very different, and that's why I said what I said.
Just going to hand over to Claire before we go to the proposal, just on what the conditions will be.
So just to confirm, the suggestion is that the recommendation is agreed with the conditions, but the condition relating to hours of opening is changed so that it's 10 p.m. close, and also additional condition restricting the use of tables and chairs to 9 p.m. at the latest.
Okay, we'll just move to the recommendation as it's been stated by Claire. Obviously, proposed by Councillor Galloway, seconded by Councillor Pitt. All those in favour? Point of order.
I think we need to check that Colin is happy to accept my
It's a very, very good point. He did nod to me that he was happy to
sure
accept.
that we're not subsuming two things.
I'm quite happy with that. So yeah, as we go, all those in favour? Unanimous. I should chair every week. And that, well, wow, you never know. That concludes today's meeting. And thank you for the guys from the journalism for coming along. Much appreciated.